What is a seizure from a neuroscientific perspective? So I'm John Andrews, I'm a neurosurgery resident and a neuroscientist, and I'm interested in epilepsy and seizures. I thought I'd talk a little bit about it. So seizures are fundamentally a disease of neurons, brain cells, doing their job, but doing it wrong, all right? So if you think about neurons in the brain, they've got a lot of jobs to do, all right? And so this is my diagram of a bunch of neurons that are interconnected, and in a normal situation, they're all talking to each other, all right? So some neurons are, so for example, when anything you do is neurons telling you to do that, or you telling the neurons. That's a whole nother lecture. So for example, if I'm moving my arm, then I have neurons in my motor cortex on the opposite side that have connections that go all the way down through the spinal cord, out, and then terminate on the muscles of my arm, saying, oh, I want my arm to move, right? But your brain is coordinating everything you do in your body. So that's also telling me to speak. It's telling even my heart to beat fast or slow. It's telling me to breathe. It's telling everything in my body to do its job. So the brain's doing a lot of different things. During a seizure, either a small group of neurons or sometimes even the whole brain, the neurons will start firing in a coordinated manner, all right? All firing together, synchronized. Now why would that be a bad thing, right? If neurons are still doing their thing. So here's one way to think about it. Let's say you're in a crowded room, and this crowded room represents your brain, all right? And all the people in the room are all the brain cells in your brain. Those people will all be having conversations with each other, all right? And they'll be having different conversations at the same time. So as an outsider, if you walk into this room, you might hear what sounds kind of like white noise or static because there's so many different conversations. But if you looked really closely, you'd see that each conversation does make sense. But overall, it sounds like kind of a white noise. And that's what's supposed to be happening when things are being communicated in the brain and everything's working correctly. However, let's say in that same room, all the people in that room started going, hey, 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 and just repeating the same word at the same time over and over again. Now, one, that would be weird, right? That's clearly not what the people are supposed to be doing. And two, there's no longer any information being conveyed. The conversations aren't actually happening. People are just repeating the same word over and over. And that's what happens basically during seizures in the brain. So we have ways of actually looking at this with different neuroscientific tools, but if you put an electrode into the brain, so neurons, when they fire their action potentials, it actually is a small amount of electrical activity, so you can measure it with electrodes. And so if you have an electrode in this group of neurons and it's doing what it normally does, you might see something like this if you're measuring voltages. A bunch of kind of spiky activity, hard to distinguish any specific thing going on, but kind of just a bunch of squiggles going on. That's like white noise, right? However, if that same part in the brain would be having a seizure, you might see something like this if you had an electrode in it, where there's a short burst of coordinated activity when everything fires at once, and then silence. And then another short burst of activity when everything fires at once, and then silence. So this coordinated bursting activity is a seizure, right? So all the neurons are firing at the same time instead of having their normal conversation. That's basically what's happening during seizures.